All right. First of all, I apologize for any confusion last week, given the nature of this as being a blended class. The whole idea of a blended class is that the instructor can piece together a mix of online materials and in the classroom materials to make sort of an optimized experience. And the whole idea of that is, this has been an idea of mine for a while. The pandemic just sort of accelerated it and made it necessary for me to explore it now. So the whole idea is that, if something were to happen, like we were to have a blizzard, all right, I would not come into class. I would announce on Canvas that I'm delivering the lecture online and you could watch it online. Or you can watch the recording, all right? So there's 3 ways to watch the class: in person, via WebEx, and watching the recording after the fact, all right? And therefore we have class on Mondays, but we do not have the scheduled class on Wednesday. That being said, I'm going to play it by ear. And if you, and if it seems to make sense for me to have a lab on Wednesday or something like that, we will. But for the most part, that's how it's going to be organized. Monday, there'll be a lecture in person, which you can watch in person. You can watch on WebEx, or you can watch the recording of. And Wednesday, there will be no scheduled class. The materials will be online, all right? So, without further ado, let's get into sort of a recap of what we talked about last week in my recorded lecture and get into some new stuff. So I have a web page here that I have written in advance, just so that you don't have to watch me type, all right? And it's entitled index.html. I didn't just arbitrarily pick that name. Index.html is oftentimes what the home page of a website will be titled. So, assuming this is the home page of my hypothetical site that I'm building, I called it index.html. Now I'm going to edit it in any plain text editor. A plain text editor is something like Notepad or Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code, all right? And we might look at Visual Studio Code later on in the semester, but I'm going to start out looking at Notepad++. All right? So I'm going to right mouse on it and say, edit with Notepad++. And this page, let's view it in the browser. This page is a page about the CISS programs at Lorain County Community College. Now remember, we can view a web page 2 different ways. When we open it up in Notepad++ to edit it, we're kind of doing like an X-ray, looking at the guts of it or the skeleton, all right? We're seeing the nuts and bolts behind the scene. That's not how a normal user is going to open this web page, all right? Any more than you don't flip open the hood and look at the engine when you're going to drive your car, right? You just get in and drive it. Sort of the same idea here. The user is going to see sort of the outside of picture of it, like a photograph of a person. So seeing it in Notepad's like an X-ray, seeing it within the browser is sort of like a photograph of a person. And we can open up an HTML page by double-clicking on the page, and it will open up within the default browser. Or in the case of Windows, it will ask us what browser we want to use. So I'm going to pick Google Chrome. And this is our web page. If you notice, different sections of the web page looks different, all right? We have these things up here, which are bigger font. We have these that are still bigger than the normal font, but not quite as big as this. We have these things which are in a bulleted list. We have these things which are actually links. And then we have a link to go back to the top. And we have a link to an outside web page. All right. So it consists of tags, some of the tags that we've seen before, like the headings and paragraph, some of the tags we haven't seen before, and that's what we're going to spend today, for the most part, talking about. All right, so the browser looks that way, because remember, the browser takes the HTML tags that we have and displays them according to the rules of HTML. So here's the actual web page. All right. And we'll look first of all at the tags that we've talked about so far. All right. First of all, this first thing, strictly speaking, isn't a tag, it's a declaration. And it simply tells the browser that it's dealing with HTML. Right? So it's called the doc type. Every document should have this at the beginning. We then have an HTML tag that goes around the entire web page. This here is the starting tag. Less than sign, the name of the tag, greater than sign. The end tag looks the same, except that there's a backslash, or there's a slash at the beginning of the name. So these two tags go together as a pair. And one nice feature of Notepad++ is we can click on this to contract it if we want to make sure everything's inside that tag that is supposed to. We then have a heading section, or a head section. And within the head, we have a title. And the title is what's going to appear in the browser on top of the tab, on the tab. All right, so right now, let's just look at these lines. We have a head, beginning and end tag. We have a title, beginning and end tag. These tags are properly nested. What does it mean when I say tags are nested? Any thoughts? Pardon me? Sorry, I still can't hear. Is one way to put it. Anyone else care to add to that definition? Yeah, they're branched off, or they're inside of each other. In other words, I can say this title tag is inside the head tag. How can I say that? Because the title tag starts and ends inside the head tag. So that means that it's nested, and it's nested properly. What would be an example of it not being nested properly? Well, if we add this. All right? Because in this case, the head tag, or the title tag rather, starts off in the head tag. So the starting tag is inside the head tag, but the ending tag is outside of the head tag. All right? The title tag is after the start head tag, but the end title tag is not before the end head tag. So this is not properly nested. If we were going to take and draw lines between these, you know, if we had these on a sheet of paper and we drew lines, the lines would cross. All right? We do a line from here to here, and from here to here, it would cross. So we don't want that. We want it contained. So if we were to draw the lines now, we could connect these two, and we could connect these two, and the lines wouldn't cross. So those are properly nested. Now, it's important where these tags are. You can't just put these tags anywhere. All right? The head tag should be at the top of the page. It should be before the body tag. And every page should have a head tag. The title tag should be inside the head tag. Right? So, title tag doesn't belong over here. Inside the body or anything else like that. The title tag belongs inside the head tag. Now, the statements I'm making here, apply to other tags as well, like, for example, about nesting. All right. Last time we looked at H1s, I think, H2s. You actually have 6 levels of headings. And think of those as being like headings in an outline. So I'm not saying that you only have 6 headings. You can have as many headings as you want. You have 6 levels of headings. So H1 is sort of the top level. So if you were making an outline, the H1 would be at the top of the outline. H2 would be underneath the H1. H3 would be underneath an H2, and so on down the line. H1 would be another starting point. It wouldn't be inside the other H1. It would be its own H1. So here I have an H1 and H2. We're going to ignore this header tag for now, right? So these two are header tags, H1 and H2. And if you notice, by default, the H1's bigger than the H2. And we have this throughout the web page. H1 and H2, H1 and H2, H1 and H2, and so on. The other tag that we talked about last time is a paragraph tag, which is a paragraph of text. And our paragraph of text is right here. Right? Notice it's this fake text that sort of looks like it's Latin. All right. That text that looks like Latin, ironically, is called Greek text. All right. It's sort of nonsense text, and it's just there as a placeholder. Now, here's something I want to emphasize. I'm allowed to put Greek text in my examples because we're not really going to be looking at my content in great detail. For the web pages that you develop, you're not allowed to use Greek text. You should actually have actual real words relating to the subject in your paragraphs. Right? So, paragraph, and the end tag is way over there. Now, notice that I can arrange these things in different ways. For example, in this case, the H1 and the H1 tag are on the same line. Here, the H2 tag and H2 tag are on the same line. Here, the paragraph tag starts here and ends over here. None of that matters to the browser as long as they're nested properly. So another way to say that is you can add or get rid of as much white space to your page as you want, and it doesn't matter. So if I were to change this to look like this, put it on its own line, that's not going to affect the way the page appears. No effect whatsoever. What I'm doing is I'm making my changes in Notepad++. I'm saving it, then I'm refreshing the web page to see the results of my change. All right, this in a nutshell is what we covered last in the recorded lecture in week 1. Do you have any questions about this? Was it pretty straightforward? All right, good. Well, we're going to try to change that. No, I'm just kidding. it's still gonna be straightforward because all tags work about the same. So if you have the idea of nesting down, that's gonna apply for all the tags that we talked about. So we're gonna introduce some new tags in here. All right, some tags that we're gonna look at links. We're gonna look at sections of the page, and we're gonna look at what else? Lists. Okay, let's start out by looking at sections of the page. If we go to any page that we want to, let's go to ESPN. All right, ESPN, if we notice, has sort of this heading at the very top of the page, sort of this header, rather, at the very top of the page. Has the logo, has the navigation in it. And then there are a collection of articles. Then there's some side things, some advertisements, some other links, and so on. Finally, when we get to the very bottom of the page, joke's on us, we can't get to the very bottom of the page. Oh, we finally did. All right. There is sort of like a footer that's on the end of all. And if you go to any other page, it's going to sort of fit that format as well. We have a heading, we have a navigation, and we have a footer at the end of the page. If we go to Amazon, it's going to be the same thing. There's a header, there's a navigation, there's different pieces of content broken down into sections. Finally, at the end, there's a footer at the bottom of the page. If you were to analyze most web pages that follow this format, header, top of the page, it sort of identifies the page. There's navigation that tells you, here's how you get to this part, here's how you get to this part, here's how you get to this part. There's then sections of content. Right? There could be one big section of content or several little sections of content. And then finally at the bottom, you have a footer. So we're going to put tags in there to identify those sections. Why are we going to do that? All right, because actually, right now, it doesn't have any impact on the way the page looks. These tags, however, will become useful when we learn about styling. All right, we can make the navigation section of the page look different than the heading section of the page. All right, that way we can easily see the navigation. All right, we can make the footer look different so that we can easily identify the footer, and so on. Plus, it helps if other programs are analyzing our web page for those sections to be defined and make it clear what part of the page is what. All right, we sort of have this. This would be our heading rather, because this tells you what the page is about. It's about Lorain County Community Colleges Computer Information Systems programs. This is our navigation. Series of links that we can use to get around the page. And then each one of these things is a section. Section about programming, section about web programming, section about mobile development, a section about working. Then finally at the bottom, we have a footer. So let's look at how we mark that in our HTML. Remember, we call HTML hypertext markup language. We mark up the page, just like we mark up a book when we're reading it by highlighting it or putting a circle around something or putting a star next to something. We mark up our text via tag to tell the browser what's what on the page. You know, we put an H1 tag around this to tell the page, hey, that's a top level heading. We put an H2 on this to tell it it's a second level heading, so on. So the tags that we're using in this case are around the header, we use a header tag. The header tag indicates that that's sort of the banner on the top of the page. All right. I say banner on the top of the page because that's usually where it is. But actually, the header could be going down vertically on the page. Could be on the left side or the right side or whatever. On rare instances, you will see it done that way. Now, don't blame me for this because I'm not the one that made this up. But it can be a little confusing to think of the head section and the header section. Those two things aren't interchangeable. All right? The head section is one part of the page. The body is another part of the page. So head and body go together. First you have your head, then you have your body. The header section is part of the body, right? It goes between the start body tag and the end body tag, right? So you can't use these interchangeably. Header is sort of like banner, a banner on the top of the page. Whereas head is where we have information about the page, like the title. Later on, we'll put some other things in here as well. Our series of links, and we haven't covered links yet, but are put in a navigation section, which is nav, N-A-V. So the nav section is like from here down to here. We then have a bunch of articles. Think of an article as a section of the page. So like if it was a news site, each article on the news site would be in its own article tag. Maybe on the ESPN site, every article about a different sporting event would be its own article tag. So in this page, we can figure it out probably if we look. Each one of these is an article. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 articles. And if we were to look on the HTML page, we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 articles. Finally, the ending is in a footer tag. Where I have a copyright information, and then I have a link that will start up the client's email application to send an email. These are ways to organize the main sections of our page. So far we've talked about header, nav, article, and footer. Those relate to sections of the page. For the most part, you're going to have one header, you're going to have one nav, you're going to have one footer, and you're going to have possibly several articles. Another way I remember the difference between head and header is that the header goes with the footer. All right, so header and footer serve the same function. Head and body are connected as well. There are actually 2 other tags that we can use in HTML. Sorry about that. There was a professor here that every time someone's cell phone went off, there was a pop quiz. So I don't do that. Otherwise, I'd have to give myself a pop quiz. And being Monday morning, I don't know how well I'm doing it. All right. At any rate, let me volume of this off. There are 2 other tags besides the ones that we mentioned. And those are section tag and aside tag. Here's a site that I refer to often, W3 School site. It's a nice sort of intro sort of tutorials on all the tags. These are grouped under the category of semantics. Semantics just really talks about the meaning of something, as opposed to like the appearance of it. So the semantic, there's actually more of them. The main ones we're going to talk about are header, which we mentioned, nav, which we mentioned, article, which we mentioned, aside, and footer. So the two of these that we haven't mentioned so far are section and aside. Section is pretty much the same as article. All right. They're two different tags, but those two can pretty much be used interchangeably. For example, if you use a section tag on your page, I'm not going to tell you, oh, that should have been an article, because they serve the same purpose. They're a portion of your content. They're a segment of your content. So article and section are synonymous. The slight difference, I would say, would be something like this. If we look at a news site like ESPN, it sort of makes sense to call these things articles, because each one of these is sort of its own article about some information. In other words, if it was in a newspaper, you'd have an article about the Penguins winning, and you'd have an article about the Packers losing, so on down the line. If we look at Amazon and their homepage, gifts for foodies, gifts you'll love, bringing in fresh energy. I wouldn't describe those as articles. I probably would describe those as sections. But the bottom line is, don't worry about it. If you make it a section or an article, it's a part of the page. It's a section of the page. Now, the other semantic tag is an aside. An aside is usually sort of out of the main flow of articles, and it's sort of a side article. Like the main articles are like right here through the middle, and on the side they have some other links, some other sites, some other apps, there's social media, and so on. So it's not sort of a main section, it's sort of a secondary section you put in the side. If you have in a newspaper, for example, if you've ever seen a newspaper, they might have an article about the Super Bowl, all right? Then they might have a side article about the city that the Super Bowl's in, what you can do if you're in that city for entertainment, right? That's what an aside is. So you didn't have to use these for lab 1, but you do have to use these for lab 2. For lab 2, you're going to write a page just about a topic you're interested in, and it should have a header, it should have a nav, it should have one or more than one article. I forget what the assignment says, and then finally a footer section. All right, questions about these semantic elements? All right, onward and upward. We're going to talk about links here. And there's several kinds of links. All right. One kind of link is like this. This is the kind of link you probably are used to seeing. A link to another web page. I click on that link and I go to a web page about Android. And it says link to Android. Click that link and I go to that. I have another one of these where I wrote sort of a rough draft of a C# tutorial. Actually, it's not really a rough draft, it's sort of a placeholder. And if I click on that, I would go to where there would be a C# tutorial. If I click that, I go back to home. Those two links are the same in one respect, but are different in another. Therefore, the coding form is slightly different. In the one case, I'm going to someone else's web page. In other words, I didn't write the Android homepage. All right. So I'm going to another web page on another web server. All right. In the other case, it's one of my own pages. So the syntax is going to be very similar, but it's going to be different. In fact, the syntax for all these links are going to be similar, but different. Here's another kind of link, a link inside the page. It's called an internal link. For example, if I click on networking, notice it doesn't go to a new page. It simply scrolls to the portion of the page about networking. This is a little easier to see if I make the browser window smaller. If I click on networking, it scrolls me over to networking. Or I could go back to the top. If I click on web development, it takes me right to the web development section. Or I can go back to the top. You often see these kind of links on frequently asked questions pages, where at the top of the page, you'll have the list of the questions. And as you click on the questions, you go not to a brand new page, but you go to simply a section of the page later on the line that has the answer to the question. That's the second kind of link we have, or the third kind, depending on how you count. Now, the last kind of link is an email link. When I click on it, it opens up my email client and allows me to easily send an email. It's not going to work on this machine because this machine doesn't have email set up. All right. But if we did have email set up, it would open up the Outlook or whatever application was set up to handle email. Would be able to send an email. All right. So let's look at these. Look at these links, how they work. All right. First of all, links are done via an A tag. A stands for the word anchor. Again, don't blame me for that. I didn't make it up. It's telling you. A stands for anchor. So all links to web pages or sections of web pages are the A tag. The A tag, like our other tags, has a start tag and an ending tag. Between the start and ending tag is the text that we're going to click on. A common mistake that students make is they do something like this. They put their link here like this. That I have a link, and here's the ending tag. That doesn't really do anyone any good because there's nothing for them to click on, nothing for the user to click on to go to that page. You always need something between the start and the end tag in a link because you want the user to have something to click on. So the text between the start and the ending tag is the text that the user, and it should be descriptive. it should clearly tell the user what they're getting into by clicking it. For example, when you do lab 2, I think you have to make some links on your page. Don't just say something like link 1, link 2, link 3, all right? Because that doesn't really tell the user what they're getting. Say this is a link to my section about the Winter Olympics. This is my link to the section about bobsledding and so on. Be descriptive. Now, this link tag has something extra to it that we haven't seen before. It has this little thing in here. And that's not a new tag. href is not a tag. href is what is called, what? href is what is called an attribute. All right. I don't know why it told me that. I hope if it cuts off, we'll just restart. Anyhow, href is what's called an attribute. An attribute is more information about the tag. So, for example, if you were helping me out and I asked you to go and get a box out of my car for me. If I just told you, hey, go get a box out of my car, you wouldn't know what to do, right? Because the question is, what car? Right? Which car are you driving? You have to supply more information. Just like if I have a link, I have to supply more information. A link to what? Link to what? And if I have an href, and the href looks like this, where you have the pound sign and a name, an ID, that means go to the section of the page that has that ID. Now, what's an ID? An ID is something we can put on any tag that identifies that tag. IDs have to start with letters, and IDs cannot contain any spaces. All right. So where I say $web, it's going to find the thing on the page that has an ID of web, and it's going to bring that to the top of the page. Now, where I say href equals $, that simply means go to the top of the page. That's why I can click here, brings the thing called mobile to the top of the page, and I can go back to the top. All right. So that's an internal link. A tag, href, and the href shows an ID of the section of the page we're going to. What about a link to one of our other pages, like I have here? It's going to be the same. It's going to be an A tag. It's going to have some text for me to click on, and then the end A tag. And then it has an href equal to, and I simply put the name of the page, tutorial.html. And I don't need to put anything before it, provided it's in the same folder. So if we were to look, my index.html is in this folder, tutorial.html is in the same folder. So if it's in the same folder, I just put the name. Now I have to put the full name, including the .html. All right, that's critical. What about if I go to a link to someone else's page? Then I put the full address starting with the HTTP. Easiest way to do that is you go to the page that you want, and you copy it. It'll copy, and if you paste it in, it'll have the correct URL to go to. These page names are called URLs, page addresses. Now, last but not least, if I want to send an email link, the href is mail to : and the name of the email address. All right, so we have those 4 ways of having links. We have an href equals a # something that says scroll to that point in the page that has an ID of that. We have an href where we just have the name of the page that says that that's a page on my site in the same folder as this page. We have https:// page name, page URL. That's someone else's web page that we're linking to. And finally, if we have mail to : that's to send an email. Questions about that? Now, there's no spaces in IDs, and IDs have to start with a letter. All right. I think that's the only rules about IDs. Okay, we have one more set of tags I want to talk about today, and that is the list tags. The list tags are listed up here, where I have a UL and an LI. The UL defines it as being an unordered list. An unordered list is a list that the sequence, the order of the elements is kind of arbitrary. In other words, I put programming, web development, mobile development, and networking in that order. Did I have to put them in that order? No. That's the order I picked for whatever reason. So it's not in order. It's not like a ranking of this is the most enrolled in major. This is the second most enrolled major, third and fourth. All right. That would be an ordered list. An unordered list has a UL around the whole list. So the UL goes around all the list items. A list item is an LI tag that has an end LI tag associated. LI stands for list item. I can put anything I want to inside that list item. In this case, I put links, but I wouldn't have to put only links. I could have a list of just words if I wanted to. If I change this to an OL, really the only difference is that we'll see numbers. Next to those things. Lists are very effective on the web. First of all, you use lists when you do your navigation, right? Because what is a navigation other than a list of links? Well, I mean, that's the definition of your navigation. But I could have other lists too, bulleted lists. Remember, people don't read web pages quite the same like they read like a book or a magazine. A lot of times people scan things. And therefore, if you're talking about the features of your product, let's say you're doing a page about your product, and you could say it's battery powered, it also has a optional power cord, It can fit in your glove compartment. I don't know, think of other things. Instead of writing a paragraph that has all those things in, it might just be easier to make a list. That way people at a glance can see the information without having to read through. Usually on web pages, you write so that users can sort of scan your page quickly, get the information. All right, I'd like to summarize what we talked about today and see if you have any questions. All right, we reviewed tags, HTML, head, body, title, H1, H2, all the way through H6, and paragraphs. That's what we did last week. Last week's recorded lecture. Yes. Oh, I thought you had a question. We then talked about the semantic tags: header, nav, article, footer, and also section and aside. It's the second thing that we talked about. We talked about links then, and we talked about several kinds of links to someone else's web page, to our web page, within the page, and an email link. And then finally, we talked about lists, which can be unordered lists or ordered lists. Are there any questions about that? Yes. No. Can you reference one of these numbers? No. These are not actually in your HTML file. That's something that this editor just does to help you find things on your page. Not so much with HTML, but like when we get into JavaScript at the end of the class, you might get a message that says error on line 6. Well, this shows you easily what line 6 is, and you don't have to count. All right. So yeah, the numbers aren't really part of the file. They're just there to sort of help you along. Other questions? All right, that's what I had today. We can go over to lab now. Remember, we did not meet on Wednesday. By all means, ask any questions you have. If there's something you want me to go in more detail in via a video or an explanation, by all means ask, and I can provide that content for you online. Okay, we'll see you over in lab.